All right, we're back at it again. Hey, what is up, guys? Welcome to Minds Behind the Music. I am your host, LA. Today is another installment of maintaining your voice / range. But as for this one, we are going to talk about falsetto. Now, there's a lot that can be said about this, but to start off, we must know what is falsetto. Now, falsetto is mainly described as your false voice. For male singers in particular, they use that false voice of theirs to hit higher notes. Now, why certain singers do this is because they will go into that higher range with the falsetto to make sure that they're not straining or hurting their voice by belting. If they can't hit those high notes with their full voice, they will have to go into falsetto. Or if it may not even have to do with hurting your voice. It would have to do with whether or not the note would just not sound right belted, or it just it's just would not it would not be in pitch. A lot of different factors play into why people resort to falsetto. A lot of times in certain genres, say like um, heavy metal and hard rock, they usually use that higher falsetto voice or the higher notes to like really give the song power, to kind of like give it an energy that the full voice could not, or the notes from the full voice could not, or the notes from the full voice that could not be able to do. And for other genres like R&B, soul, maybe even disco, they just kind of use it to add like a an emotional feel, or like a which heavy metal does this too, but they use it to add more, to blend into the rest of the music, or to kind of um add to that like um add to that like strong like fluidity in the notes, and in like the to represent like the power in the singer's voice. And it's also to resemble the dynamic shifts of the song. Say, "Fantasy" by Earth, Wind, and Fire. When the when as I'm as sure as a lot of you know, "Fantasy" by Earth, Wind, and Fire is from their 1977 album "All in All," and it's like one of the biggest hits off of that album. Besides Serpentine Fire, or Serpentine. I don't know how it's pronounced, Serpentine. Serpentine, I think it is. Yeah, Serpentine Fire. But Fantasy was the song that was sung by Philip Bailey, who was the tenor singer from Earth, Wind, and Fire, and he was known for his really powerful falsetto. Now, his voice is a big example of the strength in that tune, and he the it could not be done any other way, especially when the big key change happens. That's when he starts going higher and higher and higher with the falsetto, and you could hear the control. You could hear the him maintaining his voice so that he's not straining, and that he's like hitting it properly, and he's just adding so much like top to the rest of the music. He's adding a massive like um almost like a force yield, or a lid to uh like the whole jar of music that would be. He's adding to the rest of the orchestration, and the rest of the music that goes on. And it's just an incredible tune. I would play it here, but again, I don't want to risk getting the video taken down for copyright. So I'm just going to say, listen to it. It's a great example of falsetto, and a great example of just someone with much control in his voice. Now, I will also give you some advice on hitting falsetto. This could be, you could be a baritone, a tenor, hell, even soprano, alto. Like I said, I'm not very familiar with female singing voices, but one way that I would even, this is even just for hitting higher notes, but I use it mainly in falsetto. Um, I would say, let's say "Ram It Down" by Judas Priest. Like, you know how it has that like it goes down. It goes like down with the fifth octave notes, which is, a challenge for a lot of male voices out there, which is understandable. um, Baritones are usually sung in between the second octave notes and the fourth octave notes. I believe the range is about G2 to G4 or A2 to A4. I'm not exactly familiar. I'm not exactly sure. I believe it's G2 to G4. But as for Judas Priest, um, one way that I would do with singing higher notes is I would as the notes get higher, I slowly bring my stomach back to like almost not incredibly back, but like slowly. Like say I'll hit an E above an E above tenor C. So I'll show you. Like I'm not let's I'll move this a little bit back. Oh, there we go. Um, as you can see, when you move back, that gives you a lot of when your stomach moves back a little bit, that moves around your breathing, which will actually help you hit those higher notes and without really hurting yourself or hurting your voice or just exerting yourself. And I learned that with my vocal coach back in when I was taking vocal lessons in 2019. Oh, 1 second. Um, yeah, back in 2019, that was one particular technique that she used. She was saying to have my stomach move back a little bit as I go for higher notes, both belting and in falsetto, but I use it mainly in falsetto. Another example um, in heavy metal would be "I Am the Law" by Anthrax. I don't know how familiar you guys are with Anthrax. Depends on who's really listens, but this is uh, a fine example of hitting those higher notes in the falsetto. Because as everyone knows, Joey Belladonna is a very, very, very powerful vocalist. I think he has a lot of energy in his voice, and he's one of the few singers from the Big Four that's like has or still has his range from the beginning of his career. I'm not exactly sure on whether or not Tom Mariah still has his range. I'm not exactly sure on what kind of range he has or any of the other members, but I know Joey Belladonna takes very good care of himself to maintain his range. And on the song "I Am the Law" from their 1987 album Among the Living, I believe it's what it was from, like right after the guitar solo and it's done getting fast and it starts going back to a slow part. I believe he hits a high F sharp, and it's it's like it really signifies like this is like the energy of the overall tune, and it's just absolutely incredible. I could even show you, like, I believe I'm not going to show you the song because again I don't want to risk the video getting taken down, but it's from what I remember, it was an F sharp, and it starts out on like a lower, like I think a fourth octave note, and it goes up to that F sharp. The like he kind of builds up to that, which is another example of it blending into the music or the music blending into that note. It could go either way, and I think it's a strong example of vocal power and strong vocal power in performing. And that could be another good way to properly hit the falsetto. It could be building it up, but make sure you have the notation correct. Say if you are uh think of it tonally as well. Think of it like the say it's in A minor. What what fifth octave notes can you hit in A minor that can, you know, really strengthen the tune? Another way to strengthen your falsetto or to properly hit your falsetto notes is to think of warm-ups. And another I another one thing that I like to do is octave warm-ups, or like key warm-ups, like say in C. Keep going in that until like, you don't think you can hit a certain amount of notes left. Like, if you don't try and push yourself to where you can't really hit the note. If you don't feel like it's high enough, or you feel like it's too high, or you feel like it's too low for you, definitely keep in mind of that. Like, don't push yourself too hard. Like, if you reach a certain range, that's okay, but keeping up with that warm up would actually help you with hitting the higher notes and hitting your falsetto and increasing your vocal range. You could even start lower. Say I could start in A, or even in G. And also keep in mind of your mouth movements too. Um, I think another thing that I would usually like to do is have my mouth more like a sound when hitting the falsetto. Kind of drop your jaw while you're hitting the falsetto notes, and see what that does. Because I've when you really put that into practice, it could actually strengthen the falsetto notes. Um, like, for example, I will hit an F above tenor C. First, I'll show you. That if you as you can see from the way that I drop my jaw, it has a vocal strength to it, in which it has you really hear the note, and it's a lot more clearer, and it's a lot more like there's no over stimulating vibrato. There's not too much vibrato that will distract the note itself. And that's one way to do it. But also keep in mind of like how certain people hit falsetto. There's one artist in particular who's like the best known for like his falsetto dynamics is Prince. Whenever you get the chance, check out some of Prince's songs. Um, the one of his earliest instances that I can name, because I'm not very familiar with Prince's discography, is "I Want to Be Your Lover." That is one of his earliest instances. I believe it came from his um, 1979 second album, which was his self-titled album, and it has a very light falsetto, and he's not hitting too high of the notes, but you could tell it's a strong and pleasant sounding falsetto, I think. But it's you could tell he has a lot of control in it. I would suggest checking this out for very beginner level falsetto. Another example that when you really want to get to the more expertise level falsetto, which I wouldn't suggest covering this if you're not very familiar with falsetto, Adore. Adore is from Prince's 1987 album, The Sign of the Times, which I think is one of the best R&B ballads of all time, hands down. And the falsetto on this man, that I've from hearing this particular song, and I hope I don't get taken down just for straight up mentioning this. It's just incredible. as a lot of people know, Prince is a high baritone. So being a baritone, there's more of the use of there's more often than not the use of falsetto, at least not with all baritones, but with a good portion of them. um, Prince put falsetto to a good use. And fun little fact, I've heard that baritones actually are better with falsetto than tenors are. And the reason why I can see that is because more often than not, the tenors belt the higher notes more than the baritones do. The baritones stay in kind of like a low, relaxed range, while the tenors are kind of like and a little higher up of a range where it's more noticeable that they're singing in a tenor voice. But I've mentioned this before. Philip Bailey was a tenor. I believe he was a low tenor, but he was known for his falsetto. And the song I mentioned before, I believe it's Fantasy from 1977's All in All, the Earth, Wind, and Fire album. That's I would put that on intermediate to expert level falsetto, because you really have to like take to consideration the dynamics of the the notes he's hitting. It doesn't start too high. It starts, I believe, on a G above middle C. The I believe like when the melody starts, every man has a place in his heart. That note, like, it's not super low, but not super high either. Like it's more in the mid range, and that's one way to start off. Like, I would say more in the intermediate and expert level. I wouldn't suggest covering it unless you really, really practice and really take to consideration what I've mentioned before, which are the warm ups and the mouth movements, because they will actually do you more good than, say, just going for it. Another good example of falsetto is go on YouTube and look at Bobby McFerrin performing live and the seeing different performances of his, because he puts falsetto to good use. I believe he's a baritone as well. Um, take to Just look up anything that Bobby McFerrin has done. There's a particular performance, I think it was the Ave Maria, is a pretty viral video on YouTube of him performing Ave the Bach's prelude with Ave Maria over it. And he's singing the notes on Bach's prelude, and it has more of a falsetto, which I think is like the do 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 do, which again, like, it's good practice. And I think even he mentions in the video that there's there's good practice in learning um that kind of stuff. Like Bach's prelude is very bare bones notation and chords, because the Baroque era was kind of the start of the whole music theory and the common practice period methods. And just learning the preludes vocally they're actually good warm-up exercises, and they're actually good for like practicing different techniques, like vocal like I said with Bobby McFerrin. He was practicing his falsetto. Like, it's a good practice for your falsetto techniques. Now, there might be some other. Oh, can never forget this. Uh, Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons. Frankie Valli is another tenor singer. He is a tenor, I believe. And check out a lot of his earlier works with the Four Seasons, like Sherry, Walk Like a Man, Big Girls Don't Cry. What's another one? Um, Who Loves You? Who Loves You? That's another big one. The Who Loves You, Pretty Baby, which I would definitely suggest look. I would suggest first looking about the earlier stuff, like Big Girls Don't Cry and Sherry. I would suggest that for beginner. Take to account how you do it. One way, and I'm not sure if I'll get blocked for this, but I will give it a try anyway. Um, Take to account your breathing as well. Like, a lot of people like to before they let out a medium sized breath before they sing. And when it comes to Sherry by the Four Seasons, definitely take that to consideration, where Frankie before like the song starts with the bass line, the doom doom doom, and it'll give you some time to breathe and sing into it. The Sherry, Sherry baby, and that is that is one way to look at it. In case this video is in risk of copyright just for even mentioning this stuff, uh, all this stuff belongs to Earth, Wind and Fire, Columbia Records, Warner Brothers Records, because I believe uh, that's who owns the Four Seasons. That goes to Bob Gaudio as well. He wrote a lot of the Four Seasons or most of the Four Seasons biggest hits, and uh, Maurice White, Verdine White, and Philip Bailey, all the members of Earth, Wind and Fire and Columbia Records. That I believe it's Columbia. I don't exactly remember. I will look. I don't. I will actually look this up right now. Earth, Wind and Fire. All. Double check that. I'll double check that while I'm recording here because it's really quick. Yep, Columbia Records, same company that owned Chicago or same label that owned Chicago in the 70s. I don't know how long they were Chicago's label, but and Earth, Wind and Fire from Chicago too. I also noticed that. I think they performed together a couple times. But to the point of that, I don't own any of that music. It goes to them. If I get blocked, just know that I don't own any of that music. This is just more for to show, the effects of falsetto and the strengths and weaknesses. And I don't own the rights to Anthrax or any of their music or Judas Priest's music for that matter. Ram It Down, I will look up the songwriters right now just to be sure. Ram It Down was the Judas Priest album. Starts with that heavy scream, and Ram It Down. That's also owned by Columbia Records, so I don't have to worry too much about the labels. So it's Columbia Records and VJ Records, I believe, owns the Four Seasons. Rob Halford. It was written by Rob Halford, KK Downing, and Glenn Tipton. So just all the big disclaimers. But the point of this video is just take these songs to consideration. Another one last song before I conclude this is another Judas Priest song. I would definitely suggest listening. It is it's a beautiful example of use of both your singing range and the falsetto. Dreamer Deceiver. It is a early ballad. It's very cut, as a lot of people would say. Or my allergies. Ah, but Dreamer Deceiver is another big hit of, or not a big hit, it's a more deep cut. It's from their 1976 album, Sad Wings of Destiny. I believe that was their second studio album. And it is an absolute, I think, is one of their most underrated songs. One thing to take to consideration is just how Rob Halford sings on that song and his use of falsetto. He saves it for the very end, but that's because it's where the height of the song is, very similarly to Fantasy by Earth, Wind and Fire. Now, why I'm talking about this is because you falsetto can be a very strong tool that should be used and not abused. Now, how you can properly use it is find a certain part of a song that you're in or part of a song that you're writing or performing in, figure out when it needs the falsetto and when it doesn't, because if you just use falsetto all over the place in a part that doesn't really need it or a part that doesn't seem like it needs it, it would just look silly. Like if there's like a big part, like say at the end of a song, like you're recording a song and it has a fade out and you want to add some vocal flares to it when there's like a lot of high energy, go for it. It would actually do you wonders. And no, the sun, clouds everywhere, so the lighting's a little messed up. But guys, that's honestly how I want to end it. Like, comment, share, and subscribe if you want to see videos similar to this one. To check back with me next week on the podcast. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to upload as much, but just check back with me on my Instagram and my uh I will be posting on my Instagram story. I'll write it down here. Instagram at LA Perez Works is where you will find updates regarding the podcast. So keep in mind of that. More the podcasts will be more on you'll be seeing more evening shows rather than early afternoon shows, and just keep in mind of that. So if you if you don't see me posting podcast shows at 1:30 p.m. anymore, it's because I've decided to start moving them to a later time. Guys, I hope you have a good rest of your week and a good rest of your day. As always, stay tuned.